Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Amma ba'd. As we continue with our study, we are currently on the names of Allah, Al-Malik, Al-Malik and Al-Malik. And now we are on the final part. And we've been over the name and we are on part 6. Now we are going over how to live by this name of Allah, this powerful name of Allah, and also some of the du'as that we could say are connected to this name of Allah. But as we begin, we'll go over a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said that whoever does three deeds, then they will taste the sweetness of Imaan. The first of those deeds is one who worships Allah alone. The one who worships Allah alone. The second action is the one who declares that there is none worthy of worship except Allah. The one who says, La ilaha illallah. And the third action is that he gives in his zakat, he gives in sadaqah from his wealth with a cheerful and an earnest soul. So whenever he gives for the sake of Allah, he does it happily. He is eager to give for the sake of Allah. One who is able to do these three things, then he has tasted what's known as halawat al-Iman, the sweetness of Iman. The sweetness of Iman is that which every Muslim is yearning to taste. Every single time we stand for salah, we are yearning to taste that sweetness of Iman, that khushu'. Every single time we make dua, every single time we do anything. Because once you taste that sweetness, and then for those who has tasted it, they know that there is nothing like it. When you feel that special connection with Allah. And likewise also there is another hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he makes mention that the one who tastes the sweetness of Iman is he who loves Allah and his Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than anything else. So Allah and his Prophet becomes more beloved to you than everything else. The second is that he loves a person solely for the sake of Allah. And the third is that he hates to revert to disbelief. He hates to go back to disbelief, like how he would hate to be thrown in the fire. Or in other words, you would prefer to be thrown into a fire than to lose your Iman. A person who demonstrates these three things, then he has tasted the sweetness of Iman. Now for Allah to be beloved to you beyond all other things, it begins with knowing Him. It begins with knowing Him on an intimate basis. And when we know Allah, and we are able to connect to Allah and latch on to Him with His names, and we realize that His beloved, the best of all creation, is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, automatically the believer then yearns to implement his sunnah in his lives. Again, may Allah grant us all, guide us all to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Likewise, to truly declare La ilaha illallah, it takes having a deep understanding of what exactly an ilah is. See, we all say La ilaha illallah, but sometimes, we just know it with a brief description that there is none worthy of worship except Allah. But many a time we don't ponder deeply, how does this affect me? That an ilah can be anything. An ilah can be an object. It can be any person. But Allah, He says, هَلْ تَعْلَمُ سَمِيًّا. Have you ever heard of anyone like Allah? And when the believer studies the names and the attributes, asma wa sifat of Allah, then he realizes, وَلَمْ يَكُلْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ, that there is none comparable to Allah. And when you begin to study the names of Allah, you are swept off your feet. And so when a believer is able to say, La ilaha illallah, that there is truly none worthy of being an ilah, none is qualified for that position, illallah, that none is worthy of your love. Not a single being or entity or object is worthy of your love, illallah, except for Allah, because He is Al-Wadud, the one who is affectionate towards you. And the believer also, he says then, when he realizes this, is that if he is going to love anything of Allah's creation, it's going to be for Allah's sake, for Allah's pleasure. Likewise, when a believer, he knows who Al-Hayyul Qayyum is, the ever-living, the sustainer of all things, that we rely and we depend upon Allah for all things. Then when you say La ilaha illallah, and deep within your heart, you're declaring that none is worthy of trusting, of relying upon and depending upon or having any expectations of illallah, except for Allah, because He is the only one who can meet your expectations. As Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he makes mention in a hadith where Allah, He says, "Ana inda dhanni abdi bi," that I am as my slave expects of me. So the way you expect Allah to treat you, that is how Allah will treat you. But when it comes to human beings, sometimes we expect things from them and then they always fail to meet those expectations. And therefore we are always left in a state of disappointment. Allah is the only one who would never do that. So when the believer says, La ilaha illallah, I'm going to place my reliance and my dependence upon Allah alone. Because He alone is Al-Hayyul Qayyum, Al-Ahadus Samad, the only one who can help me. He's the one who's independent, whilst all creation depends upon Him. Likewise, He is Al-Malik. As we've been going over this name, He is the owner of the issues in your life. He is the owner and the controller of the problems in your life. And He alone holds the solutions to those problems. So again, the believer, he realizes this deep essence of Tawhid, that Allah alone can alleviate my difficulties. So, La ilaha illallah, I will place my trust upon Allah alone, because there is none worthy of worship, of being an Ilaah, other than Allah, the only one who can help me in my situations. Again, may Allah grant us all a good understanding. And so the first thing we'll cover on how to live by these names, Al-Malik, Al-Malik and Al-Malik, is Tawassul. And we go to the greatest surah, Surah Fatiha. And we find that Allah's name Al-Malik is mentioned over here. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. And it's mentioned in a hadith that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he said that whilst Jibreel alayhi salam was sitting with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he heard a creaking sound above him. And after raising his head, he said that this is a gate opened in heaven today which has never been opened before. So a gate in the heavens has been opened that has never been opened before. And then an angel descended through it. And he said, this is an angel come down to earth who has never come down to earth before. So the first ever time that specific gate opened up, it means it's something special. The first time this angel is coming down, even more special. And what happens after that? So he gave a salutation and he said, rejoice in two lights brought to you which have not been given to any prophet before you. Rejoice in two lights that have been given to you that has not been given to any of the prophets before you. And that is number one, Surah Fatiha, Fatihatul Kitab, and the last ayat of Surah Baqarah. It's mentioned that you will not recite an ayah of these surahs, either Surah Fatiha or the last ayat of Surah Baqarah, except illa u'tiya or u'tita, except that you will be given of the blessing that it contains. In another hadith is mentioned that illa u'tita means that whatever you ask Allah for, He will grant it to you. Therefore, these surahs, or Surah Fatiha and the last ayat of Surah Baqarah, it becomes a means of tawassul. SubhanAllah, the ulama, they mention when you're standing in salah, we're reciting Surah Fatiha. When you say, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een, that in itself is a dua. Before you even get to Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim, that's a separate dua. Asking Allah to guide you onto the straight path within Surah Fatiha is the second dua you make. The first dua you're making is Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. And this is open. You alone we worship, Ya Rabb. And you alone we are asking for help. Help with whatever situation you're going through. You want rizq, you want guidance, you want the solution to your problems, you want good health. And you're thinking about all of this when you're saying, وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ. That's your first dua. And then you're saying, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Guide us onto the straight path, up until the end. Two du'as within Surah Fatiha. And it's mentioned that any dua you make, or rather, the dua that you want, or the response that you want whilst reciting Surah Fatiha, what does Allah say in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when you say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, Allah, He responds to you. saying that this is between me and my servant, he says to the angels. And whatever my servant asks me for, I'm going to give it to him. Now, how could we be heedless reciting إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ and not even thinking about anything that we want from Allah at that point? Likewise, we also find with the last two ayat of Surah Baqarah, آمَنَ الرَّسُولُ and لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. We have been told to recite these two ayat before we go to sleep. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever recites these two ayat before going to sleep, kafata. These are the words he used. Kafata. It will suffice him. Now the ulama, they have made many explanations as to what kafata could mean. Because it's open. The ulama, they said that it will suffice you in terms of protection. Whatever you're fearful of, Allah will protect you, because these two ayat will suffice you against that. The ulama said also, if you want to wake up for tahajjud, this will suffice you. You recite these last two ayat, you will gain the reward of tahajjud even if you fast asleep. You want your du'as to be responded to. You want your difficulties, you want to be relieved of them. Kafata. These last two ayat will suffice you. No matter what you recite these ayat for, what's in your intention, Allah will suffice you with that. Any of the permissible desires that you have in this life, perhaps that, kafata, Allah will give it to you. The simple answer is kafata. Allah will suffice you. No matter what it is, Allah will suffice you. So we ask Allah to grant us all the ability and the tawfiq to implement this, to fulfill the sunnah, for as long as we remain upon this earth, to recite the last two ayat of Surah Baqarah before going to sleep. Now moving on, the second part of knowing how to live by the names of Allah, Al-Malik and Al-Malik and Al-Malik, is humility. And the first thing you need to be is humbled. That you want and Allah wants. Wallahu yaf'alu ma yurid. Allah is the doer of what He wants, and you don't get to do what you want. Because He's the king, you're not the king. He's the owner, you're not the owner. He's the controller, you're not the controller. So you want things. You want things really badly. Allah is saying no. The first thing in that is we are humbled. We are put in our place. Sometimes Allah, He delays a response to your du'as for this very reason. Because sometimes we start to feel entitled to a response from Allah. I'm worshipping Allah, I've been worshipping Allah, I've been going to the masjid 5 times a day for the past 50 years, Allah has to respond to me. I'm waking up for tahajjud, I'm staying away from sins, I'm doing righteous deeds, Allah has to respond to me. So why isn't He responding to me? Actually, you're very wrong over there. That is where we make our first mistake. Realize, O Muslims, that when Allah chooses to respond to you, it is out of His sheer generosity and love towards you. But He never needed your ibadah and my ibadah in the first place. So when we yearn for a response, know that this is the favor of Allah upon you. And likewise, Allah would not guide you to make a dua unless He did not want to give you in the first place. Or rather, unless He wanted to give you in the first place. So if Allah did not want to give you anything, He wouldn't allow you to make that dua in the first place. So for the believers, we are more focused, like how Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh said, that he's not worried about the response from Allah. Because the very fact that he's making a dua means Allah is going to give him. But rather he's worried about making dua in the first place. How many Muslims we have, we don't even know what sort of du'as to make. We tell a person, make dua, sit in the corner, make dua for 5 minutes. He says, Ya Shaykh, 5 minutes? It takes me 30 seconds. Ya Allah, forgive me, guide me. I don't know what else to ask. Ya Allah, grant me Jannah, forgive me, protect me from Jahannam. I don't know what else to ask. 5 minutes is a long stretch for many of us. Go and look into the du'as in the Quran. Learn them and say them. Go into the Sunnah and learn the du'as that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us and he used to make himself. And like that you'll be able to learn more and more. And before you know it, the one who loves to make du'a, he is the one who is close to Allah. It's mentioned that, for example, Allah, He says at the end of Surah Furqan, قُلْ مَا يَعْبَأُ بِكُمْ رَبِّي لَوْلَا دُعَاؤُكُمْ. Say, O Prophet, that my Lord would care less about you. He wouldn't care at all about you if it wasn't for your du'as to Him. So the very fact that you make du'a, Allah, He concerns Himself with you. He involves Himself in your affairs. And the more dua you make, the closer you get to Allah. Again, may Allah grant us all a good understanding. Moving on to the next part is tazkiyah. And we find that in the names of Allah, Al-Malik is a perfect cure for many of the diseases in our hearts. Knowing who is in control is a powerful cure, number one, for arrogance and for haughtiness or takabbur, being proud of our actions, or feeling superior towards others or over others. That when we realize that la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, there is no power, there is no change, there is no might except with Allah, that no good can be done. You cannot do any righteous deed unless Allah grants you His permission. Therefore, we seek the help of Al-Malik in fulfilling our duties. When we realize this, it is a far stretch that we can start feeling arrogant or self-righteous, or that we are better than others, because you know that you are only doing a righteous deed because Allah is allowing you to do so. And within a split moment, Allah could take it away. Within a split moment, Allah could take it away. Therefore, we continue asking Allah to grant us the honor and the ability in order to fulfill our duties. Feelings of superiority, of arrogance, of haughtiness and loftiness, when we realize that every single good that we do is only through His rahmah, and only through His rahmah we can go to Jannah. How then could we feel arrogant? When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that none shall enter Jannah based on his own actions. Then the Sahaba, they asked, even you, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He said, yes, even me, unless Allah shows His rahmah upon me. And therefore, when we look at our actions, we realize Allah, He guides us to do our actions. It's because He wants to show us His rahmah. And if He had to stop that, then what would happen to us? We wouldn't be allowed to go to Jannah. Again, may Allah grant us all a good understanding. May Allah protect us all from arrogance. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the most disgraceful man near Allah, or in the sight of Allah, is a man who calls himself Malikul Amlak, the King of Kings. Now this here, the inner meaning of this is somebody who feels so proud that he wants to stand out from the crowd. He wants to be special. So he names himself unique things. He wants to be recognized in a special way. These people are the most disgraceful of people in the sight of Allah. Those who are humble, silent, subhanallah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he makes mention in another hadith, we'll go over quickly, is the one who's unknown. He is an unknown person. Nobody knows him. You'll see him just a regular, normal person. Yet he is beloved to Allah. Those are the ones who are beloved to Allah. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. Likewise, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that there are three types of people whom Allah will neither speak to on Yawm al-Qiyamah, nor will He purify them on Yawm al-Qiyamah from their sins, meaning He will not forgive them. Now, subhanAllah, that's a big statement, right? Allah will not forgive these certain people. Already we're thinking or we're feeling in our hearts, I don't want to be from them. And the third, or rather He will not look upon them either. So He will not even look at them on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and they will have a painful punishment. The first of them is an old man who commits zina. An old man who commits zina. And in this day and age, that is not a far stretch. Because it is not only the action of zina, but even the zina of the eyes, for example, looking. How many a time we'll find with our elders, they cannot control their gaze. They've had such a long time to control and discipline themselves. How many Ramadans went by, they were fasting to control themselves. They still can't. You see them going to weddings. And in those weddings, there's music playing. And the sisters around them who's not wearing their hijab, free mixing. And they are more than happy to stare and look. And they do it unashamedly. These people, they need to rectify themselves. Because these are the first of the people who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah will not look at them, Allah will not forgive them, and Allah will punish them. The second type of person is a king who is a liar, or any person in authority, as for a matter of fact, who lies. And the third is a poor man who behaves proudly. A poor man who has arrogance or takabbur, he is proud. How many people today will see that we cannot afford certain things, but we are so sucked up in vanity and in materialism that we'll go and we'll get things anyways, just so that we can show off a little bit. A person cannot even afford fuel, but he's paying how much just for the latest car, just so that he can drive around and show off in it. Likewise with the latest phones and other forms of materialism. You can hardly afford it, but you do not want to live within your means. This is the third type of person. A poor man. In reality, you're a faqir. You're poor. Look at the reality. You can't afford things. But still you want to live that high lifestyle. You want to chase after the dunya. You want to have a lot of materialism. May Allah protect us all from that. So these are the three types of people, with inner diseases. The diseases of love for this dunya, that they fall into this. Likewise, when it comes to hasad, jealousy, we find that knowing who Al-Malik is the perfect cure to remove hasad from your heart. Do not become jealous of others. For indeed, it is Al-Malik, the owner, the king and the controller, who gave permission for that person to have what your eyes have desired. It is none other than Allah Al-Malik alone who granted it to them. So if you ask Al-Malik instead, He will give you. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, each and every single one of you will be responded to. You will get what you ask for as long as you do not become hasty in your du'as. The Sahaba asked, what is haste in du'as? He responded saying that you asked Allah and you asked Allah, but then you started saying that Allah never responded to me. You started saying, I asked Allah and I asked Allah, but He never gave me. Meaning Allah will definitely give you. Therefore we learn that the only time you will have hasad in your heart, or rather having jealousy in the heart, is a natural quality of a human being. We all feel jealous at times. This is a neutral stance. But then hasad is when you allow that to grow in your heart. So there is a good type of jealousy called ghira, where you are jealous and protective over what Allah has given you, over your spouse, for example. This is something Allah loves. This is a quality that Allah loves. But then the negative type of jealousy is when you see a person having something and you don't want him to have it because you want to have it. This will only ever happen if you feel as though Allah will not respond to your du'as. And subhanAllah, like how we were reciting in salah today, La tay'asu min rawhillah. Never lose hope in the rahmah, in relief from Allah. None loses hope in Allah. La innahu la yay'asu min rawhillah illa al-qawm al-kafirun. Except those who have no iman in the first place. Those who are disbelievers in the first place. So yes, the Muslim, you always have to be optimistic that Allah will respond to you. You see a person, you see jealousy coming into your heart. Instead of wishing hateful or negative things upon them, immediately you raise your hands to Allah. Ask Allah to bless that person, so that whatever it is that you were envious over, you ask Allah to make that a means for that person to earn His pleasure and to give you something similar or better. It's simple. It's a simple solution if we know who Al-Malik is. Likewise also controlling anger. Another point of tazkiyah that we all struggle with is having control over our anger. Knowing that Allah Al-Malik is the controller and He is in complete control of everything that happens in your life. That anything that makes you angry, it is Allah who put it in front of you in the first place to test you, to see how you will respond to that. To see whether we'll be controlling ourselves or will we lash out. Allah, He mentions regarding the muhsineen, those who He loves, the doers of good. They are kadhimin al-ghayz. They withhold, they swallow their anger, their rage. وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. And they pardon the people. So ask Al-Malik to help you control your anger. And ask Al-Malik to enable you to pardon the people. For again, He is Al-Malik. He is the one who has complete mastery over all attributes. If you want to have the quality of being able to forgive others, it is none other than Allah who will give you the ability to do so that you may become beloved to Him. So instead of holding on to grudges and all negative qualities within you for other people, You ask Al-Malik to help you in forgiving the people. قَالَ لَا تَثْرِيبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْيَوْمِ. When the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam went back to Yusuf alayhi salam, and then he said, do you remember what you did to Yusuf and his brother when you were ignorant? إِذْ أَنْتُمْ جَاهِلُونَ. And at this moment, they realized, قَالَ are you really Yusuf? And he said, قَالَ أَنَا يُوسُفُ وَهَذَا أَخِي. He revealed himself to them. This is after 2 or 3 years of interactions with his brothers. After 40 years according to the tafasir. In some tafasir, 80 years. So he said, yes, I am Yusuf. And this is my brother Binyamin. Indeed, Allah has favored us. إِنَّهُ مَن يَتَّقِي وَيَصْبِرْ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And then they said, indeed, Allah has preferred you over us, and we were wrongdoers. We committed sins. They threw him into the well. What did Yusuf alayhi salam respond saying? قَالَ لَا تَثْرِيبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْيَوْمِ. No blame will be upon you on this day. يَغْفِرُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. May Allah forgive you. وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And He is the most merciful of those who show mercy. If anybody had any right to retaliate and to punish, it was him. At this point, he was the Aziz. He was in authority. And he was wronged. He was separated from his father for such a long time. The ties of kinship was broken for such a long time. If anybody had the right to punish, it was him. But he forgave. Even then, even though he was the one who was wronged, he forgave. So could we not do the same for lesser things that happen to us? For lesser things that happen to us with our relationships? Your children and your parent and your spouses, your friends, they do lesser things to you. وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. But those who Allah loves, they pardon the people. We ask Allah to grant us all a good understanding. Moving on to the next part, which is turning to Al-Malik alone. That when you realize that Allah alone is in complete control, this should really help us with our sense of Tawhid and Ubudiyyah. That you know that He alone controls your affairs, so you will not go and ask anybody else for assistance. Rather, you know that He alone can remove your difficulties, so you continue turning to Al-Malik alone. You realize He is Al-Kareem, He is the most generous. So He's in complete control and He's the most generous. Therefore, you are always optimistic when you are turning to Allah, asking the owner of generosity to be generous with you. And now moving on to the final part, which is certain du'as we can make. And the first hadith we'll go over is where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever says Subhanallah 33 times after your farad salah, and then you say Alhamdulillah 33 times, and then you say Allahu Akbar 33 times, and then to make it 100 you say once La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah lahul mulk wa lahul hamd wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Then all of your previous sins would be forgiven, even if they are as much as the foam in the ocean. Subhanallah. And it takes maybe 1 minute to do it. Likewise also Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioned that when he used to offer his witr salah, in his first rak'ah he would recite Sabbih isma rabbikal a'la. In the second rak'ah he would recite Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun. And then in the final he would recite Surah Ikhlas. And then when he would finish his witr, he would say Subhanal Malikil Quddus. 3 times, Subhanal Malikil Quddus. How perfect you are, the King, the Almighty King, the one who is holy and pure in his essence and actions. And then the 3rd time, he would elongate and raise his voice, saying Subhanal Malikil Quddus. How many a time we see brothers over here, we're doing our witr. The moment we finish our witr, we are dead silent. We don't implement this simple sunnah with so much of rewards. It's explicitly mentioned that Rasulullah ﷺ would raise his voice, especially on the 3rd time. He would raise his voice. Way too shy, I might disturb the brother next to me. But it's more important for you. As Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he mentions, let's say if you have something where you may cause inconvenience to another person, and the other option is you fulfill the sunnah. It's more important for you to fulfill the sunnah at that point. I know we're going a little bit off topic. Let's give one very quick example. You are in the second row, and then the people, they stand up. Now the first row becomes available. There's one space. You and me, we try to be kind at times. You go, you go. He says, this is where laziness enters the heart. Rather, you have to fulfill the sunnah, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if you knew the virtues and the immense reward in the first row, you would draw lots if you had to. If you had no other way to reach the first row, you would draw lots. You wouldn't allow others to go ahead. Likewise, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that for those who continue lagging behind, you come to the masjid, you stay in the back. You're not coming and filling the rows first as we are supposed to. The people will continue doing this up until Allah will leave them behind. Again, as explained in his sharh, when Allah says, or rather when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Allah will leave you behind, it means Allah will place in your heart love for delaying every single righteous deed. So that when it comes to every single righteous deed, you delay it. You don't find any enthusiasm in your heart for it anymore. You drag your feet. And therefore, because all of your ibadah, every righteous deed is delayed, Allah's rahmah in reaching you is delayed. Allah's response to you for your du'as is delayed. Everything that you want is delayed. So this is a detriment for those of us who do this. Then again, let us come back to topic. I'm sure we've already spent enough time. We're almost at the end. The next dua we'll go over, and this is one of the du'as now for tahajjud. When we wake up, it's mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he used to begin his salah, he used to say, وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِيَ لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Now this is from an ayah in the Quran. Just the first part of the ayah, inni, is removed. So I direct my face to the one who has created, who originated, فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْض, the one who originated the heavens and the earth, Hanifa, alone. وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And I am not of those who associate partnership. إِنَّ الصَّلَاةِ وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And yes, this is something as Muslims we should be striving for tahajjud. At least once a week. And when we are offering our qiyam al-layl and our tahajjud, we should be learning these du'as so that we may fulfill the sunnah. And imagine when you're reciting inna salati and you're reflecting over this, my salah, my sacrifices, all of my life and my death, everything about me, lillahi rabbil alameen. It is for Allah alone. At this point, your Imaan should be refreshed. Your Tawhid should be refreshed. You should feel renewed vigor to worship Allah. وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And to this I have been commanded, and I am of those who submit. And then you continue saying, Allahumma anta al-Malik. And this is where your understanding of Allah's name, Al-Malik, truly comes to life. When you are in your salah, and you are saying this dua, Allahumma anta al-Malik. Oh Allah, you are the King. La ilaha illa ant. There is none worthy of worship except you. Anta Rabbi. You are my Rabb. What is Rabb? Lord, controller, master, director, nourisher, sustainer, provider, the one who guards me, the one who protects me, the one who nurtures me. You anta Rabbi wa ana abduk. You are my Rabb and I am your slave. ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي. Indeed, I have wronged myself. وَاعْتَرَفْتُ بِذَنْبِي. And I confess my sins to you. I acknowledge my sins. وَاعْتَرَفْتُ. I recognize that I have these sins. فَاغْفِرْ لِي. So forgive me. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ. Again, you're realizing now who Al-Malik is. لَا يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ. None forgives sins إِلَّا أَنْتَ. Except Allah. Alone. Except Allah. And then you continue to say. And now you're pondering. So now you've reflected over your sins and you've asked Allah to forgive you. Now you move on to the next part. وَهْدِنِي لِأَحْسَنِ الْأَخْلَاقِ. Guide me to the best of character. Because you know that Al-Malik loves good character. If you look at the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لا يهدي لأحسنها إلا أنت. Again, you're realizing who Al-Malik is right now when you say, لا يهدي, none can guide me to the excellence of character إلا أنت, except for you. This is all knowing who Al-Malik is. وَاصْرِفْ عَنِّي سَيِّئَهَا, and turn me away from the worst of character. لَا يَصْرِفُ عَنِّي سَيِّئَهَا إِلَّا أَنْتَ. Again, you're realizing the control and the ultimate power of Allah, that none can protect you from bad character except for Allah. And then you continue to say, and subhanallah, labbaik wa sa'adaik. Here I am, my Lord, happy to be here. Again, at this moment you're reflecting, are we truly happy to be standing in front of Allah at that time of tahajjud, when you and Allah are as close to each other as you could possibly be? Labbaik wa sa'adaik, wal khayru kulluhu fi yadayk, you say. And all goodness is in your hands alone. Wa sharru laysa ilayk, and evil is not from you. Wa sharru laysa ilayk, ana bika wa ilayk. I am for you and will return to you. Tabarakta wa ta'alayt, you continue to say. How blessed you are, and how lofty and sublime you are. And then you end it by saying, Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. I seek your forgiveness and I turn to you in repentance. And finally, the final dua we'll go over is where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, shall I not teach you a dua which you may say, even if you have a debt like Mount Uhud, Allah would pay it off for you. And then he said, Ya Mu'adh, say the following, Allahumma malikal mulk, Allahumma malikal mulk, tu'til mulka man tasha' wa tanzi'ul mulka mimman tasha'. Again, you're realizing who Al-Malik is, the king, the almighty controller. Tu'til mulka man tasha'. He gives kingdom to whomsoever he wants. Wa tanzi'ul mulk, and he snatches kingdom away from whomsoever he wants. وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. He raises in honor whomsoever he wants, and he lowers in humiliation whomsoever he wants. بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرِ. All goodness is in your hand. إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And indeed you are over all things all powerful. رَحْمَانُ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ وَرَحِيمَهُمَا. This is a continuation of the dua. You're saying, رَحْمَانُ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ وَرَحِيمَهُمَا. That you are the most merciful of this dunya and the akhirah, and the one who bestows rahmah. تُعْطِيهُمَا مَنْ تَشَاءُ. You give your rahmah to whomsoever you want. And وَتَمْنَعُ مِنْهَا مَنْ تَشَاءُ. You withhold your rahmah from whomsoever you want. Irhamni, have mercy upon me, rahmatan, with such a mercy. Irhamni rahmatan, tughnini biha ar rahmati man siwak. So that I will be sufficed with your rahmah in such a way that I will not have to rely on the mercy of others. So any person who is in poverty, any person who is suffering financially, he makes this dua, he will find that very soon after, Allah will bless him and will enrich him with his rahmah. Again, we ask Allah for a good understanding. I know today's lecture was quite long, but that brings us to the end of the study. And so next week, inshaAllah, we will have our breakfast. And it's been quite a while, so hopefully we'll remember. Let us all try to bring some food with us, even if it's something small. Most importantly, bring yourself. Most importantly, bring yourself, even if you don't bring anything else. Why? We go back to the very first hadith we mentioned, or rather the second one, that to taste the sweetness of Imaan is when you love a person solely for the sake of Allah. Does that not include us loving one another for Allah's sake? And how many a time can we truly come to the masjid every single time and say, I really love the people I'm sitting with right now. Yet half the time we feel a person sitting on one of the right side, a person sitting on the left side, they won't even greet one another. Is that love? Rather, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Afshu salam, spread the peace. This will build your love for one another. There's no point in studying the names of Allah so that you may know who Allah is, so that you may be close to Allah, but you're not willing to be close to the believers of Allah. We ask Allah for unity, and we ask Allah to enable us all next week to have a beautiful breakfast and to get to know one another and to fill our hearts with love and unity for one another. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب اللهم اجعل خير أعمالنا آخرة وخير أعمالنا خواتمة واجعل خير أيامنا يوم نلقاك. اللهم إنا نسألك الثبات في الأمر والعزيمة على الرشد، ونسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك، ونسألك شكر نعمتك وحسن عبادتك، ونسألك قلبا سليما ولسانا صادقا، ونسألك من خير ما تعلم، ونعوذ بك من شر ما تعلم، ونستغفرك لما تعلم، إنك أنت علام الغيوب. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا، وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان، واجعلنا من الراشدين. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد. أقول قولي هذا، سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك، أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.